Thank you everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. Now, the topic for now is going to be about Germany, but specifically recent German news. Now, you may be noticing that I have a different background than my usual. Sorry, different background from my usual. That is because I'm not currently at home. I am in Munich, and I am going to talk about Munich. Um, because one of the problems is that there's recent news that the second S-Bahn tunnel project in Munich has exploded in cost and timeline. But I don't want to make it a kind of safari video in which a Berliner comes to Munich and this is what they view of Munich. It's always going to be horrifically stereotyped. I mean, ha ha ha, the supermarkets are closed at 9, ha ha. It's like not really relevant to anything. Um, and um, and in fact, these kind of safari threads, let's say Americans may be visiting Europe right now. It's summer vacation time. They haven't really been able to take these big vacations since before Corona. The dollar right now is insanely strong, and the euro is insanely weak. So overall, a very good time for Americans visiting Europe. And some of them have opinions about policy and politics, and often they uh, justify them by their European vacation trips, and often what they say is wrong. And for example, so in older comments, people talk about AC. So my hotel has air conditioning, but it's very unusual. It's very uncommon to have at home air conditioning in Northern Europe. I don't. Uh, and Americans turned that into like, ha ha ha, it's third world. So it's a lot of it is stuff that's very consumptive. It's very much about consumption, about things that are visible to you during a summer vacation. Uh, and now, why is it relevant? It's not my intention to slag on Americans, not today. Rather, it's because Germany and in general Northern Europe has this kind has kind of the same haha denigration of Southern Europe. Um, so, and it is a problem where Um, usually, the average German interacting with, let's say, Italy or Spain or Greece or Portugal interacts with them when the German, is on vacation there. So when you're on vacation somewhere, um, you don't see any of the, uh, you don't see any of the, um, no, not just Southern Europe, it's also other parts, but Southern Europe is relevant because Southern Europe builds infrastructure massively more efficiently than Germany does. At this point, there might actually be a clean cleave in which the construction cost anywhere in Southern Europe is lower than anywhere in Northern Europe. This is a very recent thing. Nordic costs used to be Southern European. They're only now rising above the Southern European range, but it's literally the last few years. Um, and some places explode in cost, and I'm not going to say that, oh yeah, that's definitely never going to happen in Southern Europe. I mean, every place looks good until it doesn't. Um, no, yes, Borners, there is this denigration of Eastern Europe, but this denigration is about other things. So, for example, the denigration of Eastern Europe is about its commitment to democracy. It's about its um, commitment to European values. I mean, European values defined the way the average German or French or Dutch or Swedish person says they're not the way that the average Israeli Jew, for example, would perceive European values, if you know what I mean. But but there is, for example, idea that Eastern Europe is horrifically authoritarian, that it is horrifically populist, um, horrifically racist, and I mean there is a lot of racism in Eastern Europe. I mean there's also a lot of racism in, let's say, Italy or Austria, and that, for example, does not impugn Western Europe. Um, and for example, in Bulgaria, right now they're in an election period because Bulgaria is like Israel; they're always in an election period. But right now, the government in power is run by a very pro-EU reformist, like green esque party that is technically running on the same shared list with Volt. So in the technical sense, Volt is running Bulgaria. Uh, So, but again, but as you pointed out, Eastern Europe, it's not mostly high construction costs, it's a mix. Bulgaria is very cheap. Hungary is extremely expensive. Czechia used to be pretty average and is becoming extremely expensive now. Poland, I can't even tell. Poland is a mix. And yes, there are these tropes about Eastern European people being stupid. There are also tropes about Southern European people being lazy, and this is a big problem in Germany. And and this is going to be a long term problem. And the reason this is a big long term problem is that let's talk for a moment about my trip back home tomorrow. Um, so it's a trip between. I'm not gonna do the trains tomorrow because maybe they're full or something. Let's do, but they repeat. So let's try to say the trains on Friday, and there might be a little more of them, and they're going to be more expensive. We're not going to talk about the fares; it's not important. So let's see what we're going to get when we do trips from Munich to Berlin. Hi, Johnny. Uh, so trips from Munich to Berlin, you might be able to see it's 4.5 hours. Um, Mostly they run on on an hourly tact. So 55, 54, 54, 56, 56. Occasionally there's a train that is, I won't say often more expensive, but I guess Friday they're all more expensive. This is really expensive, by the way, 168 for one person. Um, and the reason this is 358 and not 434-ish is that these trains um, these trains make fewer stops. They specifically they stop at Halle rather than pinch pointing at Leipzig, which adds half an hour to the trip. So the fastest train, you might note, does this in about 4 hours, and this is a little more than 600 kilometers. So we're talking about an average speed of about 160 kilometers an hour. Now, let me find the TGV site, the TGV site, and I'm going to have to do it this way because they change their website about every 5 seconds. Les offres TGV en oui, and I'm constantly worried I'm going to accidentally hit the website that they use for American tourists, which displays all the trains for you, but at higher prices. Okay, so you might notice that unlike I put in bond.de and I immediately get uh, I immediately am told to get a how to book a train here. Votre voyage. Okay, thank you for making me click once more and making it harder for me. I promise I'm mostly not going to slag on France. I'm mostly going to slag on Germany. And they're talking about 140 million intercity 140 million intercity trips. 170 euro for legs. This is Friday, so 170 euro on a Friday. Yeah. Um, what I'm paying for my trip tomorrow, which is Wednesday, is a lot less. Um, Eventually I'm going to find this for destination, maybe. I just want to put a place where that let me put in Paris to réservez vos billets. Thank you. Une destination demain. I don't need to explain. You don't need to explain to me how to use a website. I need to Paris. Let's do Marseille and hope that they think that I'm in Paris and not in Munich. Okay. On se va pas accepter fermette. Okay, départ de Paris. Paris, Gare de Lyon doesn't. What? What is their problem? Okay, so as you can see, there are like legitimate reasons to slag on I shouldn't say Southern Europe, but France is in many ways Southern European, increasingly so. My point is that, okay, I'm just going to close this and just tell you how fast these trains are. They take 3 hours to do 710 kilometers, maybe a little more than 3 hours, like 3 hours 10. So we're talking about 160 kilometers an hour average speed. Even when you run even for the trains that only go a handful of times per day because they don't pitch and at Leipzig. And in France, we're talking about 220, 230, more if you're going on the newer line to Bordeaux. Spain has very high speeds like France as well. Italy is slower, unfortunately. I can't tell why. I think it's partly because they have worse slowdowns in city terminal zones. I also suspect they pad the timetable more because of delays. But Italian trains are faster than German trains. And people in Germany don't think that is something that they need to fix. And this is a big problem because it. So in Germany, how many stops are in France on that line? Paris to Marseille. France does not. So here's something where I wish France imitated Germany. France does not do fixed stopping patterns. Like Shinkansen has fixed stopping patterns. There's the local all stops, the express only consistent major stops. So trains do Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, Tokyo, Shinagawa, Shin Yokohama, Nagoya, Kyoto, Shin Osaka, and every train makes these stops. And and honestly, American trains have fairly consistent stopping patterns as well. And then TGVs don't roll that way. The way TGVs work is that they don't really think in terms of turnover. They think in terms of airline style running. So let's say a train goes from Paris to Lyon, like this. And then it will just go back to Paris. It is not going to continue to Marseille. Maybe it's going to make one intermediate stop with very little expected traffic. And likewise, the trains from Paris to Marseille often make one or two intermediate stops, and the intermediate stop might be the Lyon airport. But these are not stops that are expected to add a lot of ridership or turnover. And this is a problem, and this is important to explain because this leads to a kind of myth in Germany that this is the only way you can extract your high speed out of the train, and it is false. Even if you have a more consistent stopping pattern, let's call this consistent stopping pattern Berlin, you can't stop at Leipzig because then you're going to have to pinch point. So Berlin, then maybe Südkreuz, then you have to stop again, on the line is going to be Halle, then Erfurt, then Nuremberg. Then you probably want to have all trains stop in Ingolstadt, maybe, and then München. That is not something that should take 4 hours. That is something that should take 3 hours. And yeah, and by the way, having that take 3 hours is still slower than most TGV lines. Because at actual TGV speed, which is totally achievable even without stopping pattern, it could be 2.5 hours. Now, I bring all of this up because in Germany, when you mention to people that French trains are faster, they say, oh, well, France is worse. Now, they don't make up reasons why France is bad. Now, I denigrated these safari trips before. Now, these safari trips tend to be uninformed, but, and it's an important but, the safari trips tend to be informed when done by a subject matter expert about their topic of expertise. That is to say, an American who understands trains to some extent and visits Europe, I mean, I see what takes they have about this, and these are not bad takes about trains in Europe. So German rail activists who defend the decision in Germany not to build a complete high-speed rail system, and they bring up ways in which France is inferior to Germany, are not making up French problems. Like the problem that you just saw, that the website is not very usable, to be more diplomatic than I usually am. Or that the stopping pattern is inconsistent, and this means that taking the train between intermediate stops is much harder. In Germany, it's very easy. I mean, so the trains, okay, they pinch at Leipzig, so you can do things like Leipzig to Nuremberg. That's easy. Or if you take the faster trains, which the faster trains are the ones that don't do that, you have Halle to Erfurt, Halle to Nuremberg, to Ingolstadt. Maybe the fastest trains don't stop at Ingolstadt. Halle to Nuremberg. That's fine. You can do that. And so you let all these intermediate, all these genuinely smaller markets, but there are a lot of them, and you let them piggyback on the bigger market. And France does not let you do that. In France, the only piggyback is that um, so the example that I keep giving Americans who look at any American city pair and compare the cities with just Paris and Lyon is that within 100 kilometers of Lyon, you have and in Germany, of course, if it did 100, Germany is denser than France. If it did 100 kilometers from a German city, it would be a lot more. So this is 100 kilometers from Lyon. You're almost in Genève. You're in Mâcon. Mâcon has a TGV stop. Saint-Étienne, Grenoble. This is going to be Valence, which also has a TGV, through TGV stop. Vienne, Bourg. All of these are independent. You're almost in Annecy. You are in Chambéry. All of these are independent metro areas. Either all or nearly all of them have direct TGV service. It's just not going to be very frequent. So the piggybacking works differently, and so and it's kind of a system that doesn't let you do things like piggyback Lyon to Marseille on the trains to Paris. I mean, there are trains that go Lyon to Marseille. It's just that these trains run very infrequently because there's much more demand Paris to Lyon and Paris to Marseille than there is Lyon to Marseille. So trains that are dedicated to the city pair are just going to be less frequent. Again, this is a genuine problem in France. This is a way in which France needs to see what Germany is doing, and even better, what the periphery of Germany is doing, that is to say, the Netherlands, Austria, Switzerland, and imitate that. Because France has already built the most important high-speed lines. The only high-speed line France has not built that screams build to me is Bordeaux to Toulouse. I mean, the domestic one. They should also be doing better international trains like this. But um, the but in the same way, Germany looks at these real problems in France and concludes that Germany has nothing to learn from France, and that is the denigration of France and the denigration of Southern Europe, where Germans are the most familiar with through vacation trips. No shit. If you're a Bavarian and you go on vacation in Alicante or Valencia or Barcelona, you're going to see everyone else on vacation. You're not going to interact with other people of your social class as a middle class engineer, and therefore people in Germany are, for example, unaware that Spain has, if anything, much more engineer prestige than Germany does. And Germany has, let's say, more engineer prestige than, let's say, anything that speaks English. So, and by the way, Italy also has engineer prestige. It's just that a German engineer who vacations in Southern Europe does not see that and grows, and maybe even this engineer drives, and and this engineer might even notice that the highways in Italy are very fast, but they would still not give respect. Does France ever run shorter consists? Yes. Hi Scout. Does France run shorter consists on lower demand routes? Yes, they run 8 car. I shouldn't say 8 car. 200-meter trains that are only single deck and have 300 something seats, so about the same number of seats, maybe a few more seats than in a Stella. And then on the high demand routes, first of all, 2 trains will be coupled together for a 400-meter unit, and second, in France, they like doing double deck trains. I think at this point, anything going from Paris in the direction of Lyon, even if it doesn't go to Lyon, is double deck, and these trains are 1,000, maybe 1,100 passengers. But yeah, no, frequency in France, unfortunately, is measured in trains per hour. In trains per day. In Germany, it's measured in a train every hour, a train every 2 hours. And this is a good thing Germany has done. The problem is, so as I said, people in Germany look down on France. They look down on Southern Europe. And how do they look down? They look down on the fact that trains in France and in Southern Europe are rather unreliable. And they say, okay, Germany should just invest in reliability. It's okay if trains are so much slower than flying and often not even that much faster than driving, because what matters is reliability and service to little towns in the middle, and these are towns that are often much littler than Leipzig and Erfurt is, for example, a town that probably should never have gotten a high-speed rail stop. They just yelled until they got to detour. So instead of the high-speed line going like this, the high-speed line instead goes like this. It's not a big detour. It's a small detour. The problem is that the mountains here are thicker and taller than the mountains here. So the construction costs are higher. And so about that, let's talk about Deutsche Bahn punctuality June 2022. So this is all old. So punctuality is dropping, and eventually I'm going to find a quarter of long distance trains in Germany did not arrive on time in 2021. So this was significantly worse, although that's just because I guess fewer people are riding during Corona. And this is what happened to punctuality on German trains. Now, you might notice something, that DB Regio, the regional trains, are still almost okay. I say almost okay because a lot of these trains rely on timed connections. Now, if you're 5 minutes late, you're not going to miss your time connection, but it's going to be annoying. Usually the connections are something like 8 or 10 minutes, but 15 minutes, so a couple percent of trips will be missed, and some trips are just dropped. I had this a few weeks ago that the direct, I mean, not direct, I had to transfer the direct train that I was taking home from Leipzig was cancelled, and somehow the alternative ended up delaying me by about an hour. And then, Fernverkehr. 58% of trains in Germany last month arrived within 5 minutes of the scheduled arrival times. With arrival time within 50 minutes is 77.3%. Yes, Nordathlon, exactly. It increases speed and reliability. That is exactly correct. This is what is being missed here. So by the way, my train to Munich when I was visiting, I'm still visiting. When I was coming here was 13 minutes later. It arrived in Munich, 13 minutes behind schedule. So it is among the 77.3% trains here, but it is not among the 58% here. It's not actually I imagine based on the trends, it's going to keep going down. It might even go worse than 50% this month. Note that this predates the €9 ticket. The €9 ticket only started here and does not affect intercity trains, only regional trains. So by the time the €9 ticket was implemented, there was already this catastrophic drop in ridership, and non-ridership, in punctuality. Now we do see the effect of the €9 ticket maybe on the DB Regio, but DB Fernverkehr is not even subject to the €9 ticket, and look at what happened. And this is often a matter of very high ridership, stressing the trains. Now we do have level boarding in Germany on the regional trains, but not on the intercity trains. Now that is a problem, but if you're American and you're watching this and I say no level boarding, what you may be imagining is American-style lack of level boarding. So the platform is about 200 millimeters above the rail. The door is very narrow at the end of the car and is 1.25 meters. So it's, I think, maybe 3 steps up, maybe 4 steps up, I'm forgetting. And they're very steep, and they have these trap doors. This is not what non-level boarding means in Germany. It's the doors are wider, the steps are built into the train more. There are fewer of them. I think it's 2 and not 3 steps, maybe. So it's not catastrophic. but maybe the aisles, but maybe people take a lot of time to orient themselves in their train, to find a seat. Um, they have to ban people from bringing bicycles on the train because the trains are already too crowded. Trains that should have empty seats do not have empty seats on DB Regio. There's also a problem where where you have cascading failure. So this is something that Diego, who I I don't know if Diego is here, but he has sometimes been commenting this channel, that he was mentioning recently that maybe today, maybe yesterday, he oh, hi Diego. Yes, that's you. Yes. So what happened to Nordatlan, aka Diego, is that a train uh a train was canceled, and that created a cascading failure because suddenly the next train had twice the passengers, and first of all, not enough seats, and second, the number of standees on a train in Germany is capped. So standing tickets are permitted in Germany, but if there are too many standees on a train, it is forbidden for reasons of maximum axle load, and and that exceeded the maximum. So a lot of passengers were further delayed, and there was no good prioritization system. And the upshot is that the delay was measured in hours for some of the passengers. And so when things get screwed up a little bit, suddenly these kinds of delays cascade. And now bear in mind, ridership is high. Ridership in May on DB Fernverkehr was above pre-corona levels. Okay, this is something that is already achieved in Germany. I do not know to what extent this is true on local trains. I mean, obviously in DB Regio, on these strong trains between small towns, the Dessaus, the Halles, the Hofs, the Ingolstadts. Ridership there is very high because people are abusing the fact that there's a €9 ticket, um, which means that first of all, your monthly transit pass is €9, but more importantly, it is valid on all local and regional transit Germany wide. So, okay, I have a monthly ticket for my normal travel in Berlin, and that gives me, okay, normal urban travel within Munich, but also regional trains always in between. So there are people just string free trips if they're willing to spend, let's say, 10 or 12 hours on a train between Berlin and Munich. You can do it for free right now. It's for 3 months. Uh, it's a measure passed to alleviate the burden of high fuel taxes, together with a cut in the fuel taxes. Measure that was the fuel tax measure was the baby of our finance minister, I believe. Lindner, a man who, when Russia crossed the border into Ukraine on the 24th of February, and Ukraine asked for help, he told the Ukrainians, "You're going to collapse in 72 hours. What's the point in us helping you?" So anyway, this guy also wants to cut the fuel tax. Again, the fuel tax is being cut for 3 months. Except that the cut is completely countermanded by the fact that fuel prices in general are high, and also the euro is trash. So, uh, so even before, but remember, even before the €9 ticket, the €9 ticket only started June. DB Fernverkehr was 5% above pre-corona ridership in May of 2019. So they regained back all of the corona. No, the part about the nuclear reactors is not Linda. It's our green minister for something environment, plus a few extra to make him feel more important. Robert Habeck, who said that there were technical difficulties preventing the reactors from continuing. For example, they were supposed to be discontinued at the end of 2022, and so Germany did not procure uranium beyond 2022. Um, it turns out that the supposedly insurmountable technical difficulties are not, in fact, correct, and he's just looking for excuses to not have nuclear power. The nuclear, yeah, exactly. The head of, yeah, exactly. The head of one of them, the SR1, said that they can keep running them just as long as they get the license to do so. So very fun. Um, each of the parties in the government and in the opposition lies about something else. Um, at any rate, about the punctuality issue, um, there's this mentality that punctuality and high speed are opposing forces, and they're not. Because often the problems with punctuality come from the fact that capacity is very limited when trains with very different speed profiles have to share the same line. So one of the ways that you can make trains reliable is by having separate lines for fast and for slow trains. And this means building a complete network for the fast trains. Now, this is not now. Um, okay, now I can see all of my video names. This is not something that France has done. France has almost done that, but remember, the system in France is specific. Remember how I said I'm going to slag on Germany much more than France? So I'm going to slag on France a little bit more, just for context. The system in France is not based on timed transfers or timed connections. The system in France is based on the idea that if you are riding a train that is neither a TGV nor a train in the Paris region, you are a dreg and a subhuman. The only thing worse from the perspective of the French governing elite than the users of public transport, than the user not of public transport, light rails, okay, than the users of mainline rail that is not TGVs and is not Parisian. The only thing worse than that is either a Muslim immigrant or a black immigrant. These are, I think, the only people that they hate more than the sort of people who might ride a regional train in the Riviera, for example. And this means that they don't invest in them as a coordinated system. So if infrastructure, rather like the system for the TGVs, were available in France, were available not in France, were available to Swiss planners, for example, or Dutch planners, I think that what they would be doing is they would be running trains from Paris to Lyon, and they would time them so that you'd have express regional trains that do things like Lyon Saint-Etienne. It's, I think, the most important of these, or maybe even Lyon Grenoble might not have through service. I mean, Lyon Grenoble might have through service, but something like Lyon Saint-Etienne might not. And it is going to be on the basis of trains on a fixed interval. Switzerland is hourly, but this has more population and probably should be every 30 minutes, even every 20, and then just be timed to meet the TGV. Now, if this is late, yeah, you're delaying people to the next TGV, but it means that, but because it's a very strong trunk line, the trains might come every also 20 minutes. And if you can somehow string them so that trains can do Paris-Lyon Marseille on one line, it's going to be every 10 minutes. So this means that even if the fast trains don't wait for the slow ones, you have good connections. And this is not how France rolls. The way France rolls is it's going to be a few trains per day of direct service, and they can get delayed here because, again, this line is run on a basis that says that punctuality is unimportant. I had a lot of personal experience taking regional trains here in the Riviera, and I gotta tell you, often I was coming to a train knowing when it was supposed to leave, and I was there maybe 2 minutes early or 3 minutes early, and I was seeing a train just having left the station, not because my train was 3 minutes ahead of schedule, but because the previous train was delayed 27 minutes. And so these were half-hourly trains. It's not clear from context. And so the mentality here is, so the mentality in France is that it's not worth investing in these. Now in Germany the mentality is different, but you still run into problems where trains can get delayed, and the more interlined the system is, the more delays on one portion of the system are going to uh, are going to cascade to others, um, and so the line between Berlin and Munich, for example, for substantial portions, let's say between around Halle and Nuremberg, um, so rather between Halle and somewhat north of Nuremberg, and again from Nuremberg to Ingolstadt, it runs on dedicated high-speed track. Um, I never remember if this dedicated high-speed track also hosts freight trains. Some high-speed lines in Germany also host freight trains. I don't remember if this is one, if these are two of the ones that do, but it doesn't matter because these are passenger primary lines. The freight trains are not going to delay the passenger trains. What is going to delay the passenger trains is maybe um, in one of the shared segments, like I think between Nuremberg and maybe Bamberg, um, or between München and Ingolstadt. Maybe they get delayed because they're stuck behind a regional train, and the problem is that is going to cascade all the way up to Berlin. That delay. Um, and like was from Berlin to Halle, they run on a very fast line, but it's still a shared line. Um, Ciao, ciao. Thanks, Diego. Um, yeah, exactly. This is so I use the German trains more, but yeah, the delays. So, I mean, I mean, they're not always late, but they're so often late that often you just learn that a 5 minute delay is not a delay, and a 10 minute delay is to be shrugged. It's a little bit like with the American trains, where even the part of the United States where the trains are actually used by a larger fraction of people, so the Northeast corridor between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, um, the trains um, are are going to the trains are, in my experience, on that line in America, they're delayed by at least 5 minutes about half the time. There are actual statistics in this that say that they're doing better, but these statistics are measured at the end of the line. The Americans adding 10 minutes before the last station or behind or before the penultimate station, so they can say that they're on time. I mostly rode not all the way up to Boston, but only up to Providence, so I was more exposed to the delay and didn't have as much schedule padding. Again, about 50%. In Germany, maybe it's a little bit better, but only a little bit. This is not Switzerland, and even in Switzerland, I've seen delays. And yes, I have no choice but to use the bid. It's not that I have a choice, which is to travel less. The €9 ticket has made people travel more. There's no evidence that I know of that it's made people drive less. Um, I, if you own a car, you're not the sort of person who are going to switch from the car to the train just because the monthly has changed from 86 euros to €9 a month. Now you are absolutely going to travel more because with the €9 ticket you can travel to other cities. But if you have a car, the car's just going to be faster. I don't own a car in Berlin. I don't see a reason to. But if I had a car, the car would do Berlin Leipzig faster than stringing regional trains does. I mean, the regional trains are averaging 60 kilometers an hour. I mean, the Autobahn. I mean, yes, there's traffic at both ends, but I mean, this is not a 3 hour trip by car. Okay, I mean, this is. I mean, I'm not going to say it's an hour trip, even though there's no speed limit. But I mean, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, um, I don't know. What I've seen is that they have not um moved significant traffic from cars to trains. Bear in mind that about traffic jams is that we also have massive fuel prices. Like our fuel prices are so high, despite the cut in the fuel tax, that itself may be having an effect. In the same way that in the United States, there was this big increase in fuel price in the around 2007 2008, and that led to measurable decreases um, in um, in driving, in vehicle kilometers uh, driven, and a lot of the um, interest in building mass transit in the United States and high-speed rail came specifically from that era. Um, yeah, PKP has a lot of problems. PKP, for example, my understanding is that they're French style, so they like to give everyone a few daily trains to the capital rather than have a coherent tact. Pony of sometimes Collins here mentioned to me once that um, that when they're trying to fit the PKP trains into the Czech tact, at Ostrava, at one point they had to delay a train by an hour just to make it fit into a tact. Um, so, um, so yeah, so I'm not saying that PKP is especially good at this. I wish. As I said, Northern Europe looks down on Southern Europe, but Eastern Europe, I don't think Eastern Europe does this better than Western Europe. Um, I think that punctuality aspects are done better in Northern Europe than Southern Europe, but Germany specifically is not very good. It's the penumbra of Germany, the countries that learned from Germany and use the fact that they're small enough not to need high-speed rail to just invest in a regional and interregional network very well. That is to say, the Netherlands, Austria, and best of all, Switzerland. Um, but but again, in Germany, it's just I wouldn't say it's not as good, but I mean, it's at least traditionally it was better in Germany than in Italy. Maybe this year it no longer is, but it's problems that are not unique to Germany. It's just that Germany may be thinking, oh, we don't have anything to learn from France because they have these problems too. Well, yeah, France has these problems too because the TGV system does have un, these generally unprofitable tails on classical lines. Um, and in Germany, in the long term, what they should be doing is building a complete high speed network. I don't mean a high speed line to every new town or something to every little town, but something like Berlin connected to Halle, but also maybe have a branch to Leipzig. If it's fast enough, you can run separate trains to Leipzig, Berlin, Leipzig, Leipzig to Munich, and Berlin to Munich, and they're going to be at least hourly each, maybe even more than that, if everything is fast enough. Um, and then you might even be able to piggyback on the line depending on how you build it, and run part of it for high speeds to Dresden. And depending on how you draw it, you might even be able to beat Leipzig to Dresden on that line, but doing something weird like this. This at high speed is going to be a lot faster than this at legacy rail speed. Like uh, high speed. Like remember, intercity trains running on legacy track. Usually they're going to average, 100, 120 kilometers an hour. High speed ones, 200 plus. So you're 2x. And then Berlin Hamburg is like can stay as it is. It's already fast. It's legacy. It's fast with tilting trains. Um, I don't really see a reason in trying to make it even faster a little bit by building a parallel high speed line. It doesn't connect to anything else. Maybe Hamburg to Dresden or something, but that's not exciting. Um, but and again, some of this is something that they are doing. They are doing some investment. Things like Berlin to Hanover is mostly high speed line. I mean, it's not 300 kilometers an hour. It's partly 250, but they're speeding up more parts of it um, that are inappropriately limited to maybe 200 or 160. Hanover to Bielefeld, they it's a line. It's one of these really frustrating lines because Hanover to Bielefeld and Bielefeld to Dortmund should be half an hour each. Um, I mean, the lines are much slower. And so they're turning. So they're taking this line. Let me see if I can zoom in enough so that you can see how curvy it is. So they are actually building this. But for some reason they're saying it's not going to be 30 minutes, but 32 minutes, which is very awkward for all the time transfers. Um, and again, you have all these people who look down on France and say, well, we can't have French average speeds because you can only do it when the trains are nonstop for 600 kilometers. No, you can't. I mean, you literally can plug in Nagoya to Kyoto on this line and compute average speeds, and you can do this in 27 minutes. And yes, Shinkansen trains accelerate faster than ICEs, but the Shinkansen between Nagoya and Kyoto doesn't do 300 kilometers an hour. It does 270, maybe at this point 285, but mostly 270. This would be 300. So build this, which again is being done just too slowly. They're only doing this, like up to Ham. Like you want to build some tunnels here to have to let trains be fast all the way to Düsseldorf and Köln, and avoid being slowed down by regional traffic within the Rhine-Ruhr. There's something called the Y-Trasse. So this is a Y between Hamburg, Bremen, and Hannover, a line that I think people understand need to be built, but is... Give me a... Okay, I have sun in my eyes, as you might be able to tell. A line that people understand can be... needs to be built, and everyone understands that it needs to be built, with the exception of the NIMBYs in this area, who, on various specious grounds, sued it to oblivion. It's progressing. It's just progressing extremely slowly. And once everything is built up, so that when you can connect between any pair of major German cities on an entirely high-speed track, or special case, the tilting track between Hamburg and Berlin, you don't have as much track sharing between trains of different speed classes, because on the legacy lines you would have the faster freight trains, and you would have the regional trains, and they run pretty similar speeds. And then on the new tracks, you would have the high-speed trains running at a different speed, and that's okay. So the trains are not going to delay each other as much, so suddenly you're going to not have to deal with this kind of... you're going to not have to deal with this kind of... with this kind of cascading delay any longer, and then this is something that Germany should be doing, so that this graph, this should not be 62.7% or 58% or wherever it's going to fall these months. This should be in the 80s. In Switzerland, I believe, with not a 5-minute standard, but a 3-minute standard, it's about 89%. Let me check this again, because SBB punctuality 2022. So pünktlich ist die SBB unterwegs. Gesamt 89.8% Zugspünktlichkeit. And the trains make their connections. This is gestern, in letzten Monat, slightly better. Yeah. 92% by 3-minute standard. Did I just click something wrong? Anyway, 58, just remember that it's here. So the comparison, so it's 58% by a laxer standard than this 92%. And unfortunately, again, people like reformers in Germany keep saying, "Oh well, Switzerland did not build high-speed rail, so Switzerland did not build high-speed rail, so why should Germany?" And this is going to let me segue into another important piece of news about German rail, which is called Zweite, which is where I am. Zweite Stammstrecke, second main line. So, as I said, I am currently not at home, but I am in a city that is far wealthier than my own. I want to say more conservative. It's not politically conservative. Munich is like the #2 LGBTQ center of Germany after Berlin. I mean, literally, while taking pictures of trains around here, I saw a PwC headquarters that had a that had a pride flag on it, and not even the schlock just rainbow flag, like the ones with the parts that have the trans flag inset and the ace flag inset in it. Um, and so this is Munich, okay? So when I say conservative, I mean again, supermarkets close earlier. Uh, and oh right, I can't click links. I keep forgetting that this is not actually. So this, as I keep telling people, the chat box here, uh, as you can see, I mean, when people say things in chat, I see this, but I cannot respond here because I'm not logged in. So there's a Deutschlandtakt here, but um, importantly, in Munich there is an S-Bahn. Uh, it is the busiest S-Bahn line in Germany. It is almost the busiest in Europe. I believe the only lines that are busier than the S-Bahn trunk in Munich in Europe are the RERA and the RERBD lines in Paris, so that would be two lines. Berlin Berlin has more S-Bahn ridership than Munich, but Berlin has three trunk lines. Munich only has the one. They took the approach to Hauptbahnhof, and then they connected it in the 1960s and 70s in conjunction with when they built the U-Bahn. They connected it like this. You can see where the train stations are at this zoom level. Actually, let me move a little bit because I'm paranoid whether people passengers this is passengers per day, but also trains per hour. Okay, so you can't see right of where I'm putting my anyway. So there was Ostbahnhof here, a station that, unlike in Berlin, was not a terminal. It connected these lines to these lines, and also connected to a bypass. But this was very awkward, and the trams from both of these to city center, which you might be able to tell us here. This is the tourist ghetto. Um, uh, the trams were overcrowded in the 50s and 60s. Not only was Germany growing very fast in this period, recovering from the war, but also Bavaria specifically was growing. Specifically, Munich. Munich was a large German city before the war, but it was not the richest. It was not one of the largest. Munich grew very much. Munich is very much a city of the second half of the 20th century economy. Cars, chemicals, general manufactured goods, Siemens, so things like Siemens, MAN, BMW. Um, it's not, and this is also true of many of the other cities of southern Germany, like Stuttgart, for example. Um, and this is distinct, for example, from the first half of the 20th century economy of coal and steel of the Ruhr of Saxony. Um, and so this was growing very fast. So the trams were overcrowded. So what they did was they, first of all, unlike in other German cities, but like in Nuremberg, when they built the U-Bahn, they built it as a completely grade-separated system. They didn't just bury some of the trams a subway that is building a subway at lower capacity. It's called a Stadtbahn. In places like Stuttgart, Frankfurt, Köln, Dortmund, Hannover. Rather, so first of all, they built this three-line U-Bahn system, a very highly branched one with three trunk lines. And in conjunction, they also built one S-Bahn line, which is this. It's a kind of awkward line because some of the trains go like this, as you would expect. But the trains that go in this direction, what they do is they go to Ostbahnhof, and then they pinch and reverse direction like this. A little bit awkward. At any rate, this is the most crowded line in Germany. There are about 900,000 uh, daily riders. Yeah, it's not just about Pride. It's lots of other queer community things. That um, it's a lot of other queer spaces that Berlin has, and again to some extent Munich. Uh, and at any rate, um, this is 30 trains an hour. There are normally 7 core lines, and they run every 20 minutes, but they also sometimes have augmentations, so it ends up being 30 trains an hour. This does not exist in Berlin. Berlin sometimes does 24. Some lines only have 18 for reasons beyond my understanding. It's not signaling because the signaling in Munich, it's kind of cool, but it's not something that is beyond the abilities of Berlin to build. It's just the normal high-end rail signaling in Germany, LZB, Linienzugbeeinflussung. Uh, but they just cut it into very short blocks that are not quite moving block, but are short enough to pantomime, to kind of LARP as a moving block without actually having the expense of moving block signaling. And so anyway, this is what Munich has. It's critically crowded, so they figured they might want to build a second line. And maybe the second line can make fewer stops, so it's going to go Ostbahnhof, Marienplatz, city center, and then Hauptbahnhof. And that line has been delayed due to complaints about costs, complaints about whether it is even necessary. There are quite a lot of very technical NIMBYs who think that it's not necessary and people should just not have to go to city center because something regionalism, and instead trains should just run through the bypass here, or they should run through the northern bypass here. And yeah, the trains can run more frequently if you have fewer of them going to city center, but excuse me, but the jobs are around here. There's a reason that the bypasses are just weaker. And it's not a Munich special, it's in everything. I mean, Paris is the same thing. When you try to bypass city center on, let's say, Metro Line 10, it's just not going to have as much ridership, or the RERC, same thing. And so there's this slogan, why not north-south alignment? Because that's already provided by the U-Bahn. The U-Bahn has a bunch of these. And importantly, what would a north-south alignment connect to? So this is the map of railways in München. If I try to do a north-south alignment, okay, I have lines to the south that I can totally do a kind of RERA type thing and do, let's say if I'm going from this line, go like this maybe. But then what do I do at the northern end? Do I go here maybe? That's a long tunnel, and this is, I mean, this has to be a lot of DoD to justify this. Like I'm sure this is a perfectly nice area, but just look at the land use. Like it's not, like I mean, it's not single-family suburbia or anything, but this is not this. So anyway, this is where you're doing a second east-west. And so the point is that there was a lot of doubt about whether this was necessary. It was. It still is. And there's a slogan that I sometimes use in kind of the opposite meaning of the one intended by the NIMBYs, which is organization before electronics before concrete. So let me see if I can find it. It's Organisation for Electronic for Beton. And this is the system. This is an American, like, this is me riffing off of these people. So, in case you guys are unaware, there is a Swiss planning slogan, which is Elektronik for Beton, which means that it is much cheaper to improve railway signaling for the trains not to run into each other. It's much cheaper to build pocket tracks at difficult junctions than to just build extra tracks. It's much cheaper to have good digitalized schedule planning than to just fully segregate fast and slow trains. Now, I did say that Germany needs to fully segregate fast and slow trains. That's because the electronic part in Germany is often already optimized. So what they do in Switzerland is they first of all optimize the electronic part. They make sure that everything connects. They make sure the connections are timed. They make sure that they make sure to. I don't want to say use data because use data sounds like a kind of Anglo thing about like using something with machine learning. But they do track where their main. They do track where their main uh, delays are, and they focus on uh, again, things like grade separating specific problem junctions, or if it's too expensive, pocket tracks so that a delayed train can wait. A lot of things about how to make sure that delays don't propagate, less so than making sure that delays don't originate in the first place. Yes, I exactly mean this. Um, so they build the electronics in Switzerland, and then they build the concrete. Switzerland, I believe, has built more intercity rail tunnel in the last few decades than has France. Um, Less than Germany, but I think maybe more per capita than Germany, and that is without the base tunnels. So excluding the Gotthard base tunnel and the Lutschbach base tunnel, even without these, Switzerland has built more railway tunnel, I believe in absolute numbers in France and per capita than Germany. There will be things like the line from Olten to Bern has a fair amount of tunneling in it. Tunneling in the suburbs of Zurich, tunneling in the suburbs of Zurich to um, separate fast and slow trains when they've reached the limit of what organization and electronics can do. And unfortunately, the Munich NIMBYs have used the expression Organisation for electronic for beton to argue not for electronics before concrete. Munich invented modern electronics. The modern so Munich did not invent the idea of like having trains that are at even intervals, but it has invented modern takt planning. The idea that you not only make sure that the trains are at even intervals, but you have the same even intervals for the entire system, and you organize timed connections in the suburbs based on that, and you organize and you keep some of the outer branches single track because you don't need to double track them because you can write timetables in which the trains um, are sufficiently separated on the single track, and then you can only and then you only need to double specific meets. That is a Munich invention. Munich invented how to do modern organization and electronics. I don't think that it has been surpassed. Um, I would not say that Zurich is clearly superior to Munich in organization and electronics. What Zurich is superior to Munich in is that Zurich has been able to build a second tunnel because the construction costs in Zurich were, until last month, one half, maybe one third those of Munich. And in Munich, the line was delayed. And I'm not going to blame the NIMBYs. I'm going to blame a lot of things, but these kind of technical NIMBYs, the ones who, again, are not just stupid people who say no to everything. They have counter proposals. Often these counter proposals are not completely stupid. Often they bring up real points. But seriously, Munich has optimized the electronics. It needs concrete. And it started building it a few years ago and building the second S-Bahn trunk. This is a 7.4 kilometer tunnel, I believe, that was budgeted at I want to say 3.6, 3.7 billion euros. That would be about half a billion euros per kilometer, making it, I want to say, the most expensive tunnel ever built in a developed country that does not speak English. It is not. The RER-A tunnel in the 70s somehow had an unbroken record. And then came the news yesterday. Not yesterday, last month. And I can like literally just link to everything that has been written about this because because the news exploded. This is all very new stuff, but I believe this broke on the 30th of June. That the cost is not going to be completed in 2028 as planned, but in 2037. All of this from the excellent newspaper of Munich, Deutsche Zeitung. Excellent, except from time to time it publishes Putinists, or at one point it published a TERF. But this is not me being sarcastic usually, like its coverage is usually good. It's just that from time to time, like big tent among people who identify with various strands of the left and center left, and some of these people are morons. Anyway, I literally was at the construction site at Marienplatz earlier today, and I saw very clear. So first of all, I saw an information office that was closed because they're only open Thursday and Friday and Saturday, I believe. And second, a poster saying that this will be complete in 2028. It's not a 6-year project. The project did not start this year. It started 2018, maybe 2019. Yeah. So bear in mind, this is not entirely a real cost overrun. One of the reasons. So France likes using constant euros. So in France, everything is in euros of 1 year, and then if there's inflation, that's not a cost overrun, that's inflation, which is the correct way to do it. In the United States, the government works in nominal dollars. So if there's inflation, or if projects take longer than expected, and then it's just more years of like 2% inflation, then the costs automatically rise and have to be accounted for. Um, so in Germany, bear in mind that part of the reason this is not 3.8 but 7.2 is first of all this bit, it's going to take longer, and second, inflation this year was higher than expected. The inflation here was supposed to be something like 1%. I mean, the inflation target is 2%, but since the Great Recession, we've always gone way below inflation target. So it's been like maybe 1%, 1.5% every year, and suddenly this year I think it's something like 6%, 7%. So the and so that counts as a cost overrun. And again, it's 9 more years of what is not expected to be 6% inflation here. It's going to be, they expect it to be 2%, but 9 years of 2% is what? That's a 20% cost overrun right there. I mean, 20% out of factor of 2, but these are exponential, so it's a quarter. So this is just a 2% inflation. This is a quarter. Inflation this year coming higher than expected. Again, that might be another quarter between this year and expectation of inflation taking a few more years to follow. So again, this is not entirely a real cost overrun. I'm guessing it's about 50-50. Even then, 7.2 billion euros on a project that's about 7.6 kilometers. Yeah, it's not going to be 2028. That is horrific, and already it might just turn out to be what is. I don't want. Yes, deactivate all. I fucking hate this. Just make websites not do tracking cookies. So one of the issues is that this was an important project for the state government of Bavaria. Not much for the city. Watchers from the United States may recall that in the United States there's contentious, especially in New York, but not just, contentious city versus suburb politics around commuter rail. The city gets the other urban transit, the suburbs get to commuter rail. Mixing them is considered bad because it's literally just the mixing of the races. A lot of it's just racism in the United States. So suburban racism against a more racially mixed city. Munich has a little bit of that politics as well. Now, it's not. I wouldn't say it's not racist. They are racist, but this predates modern mass non-white immigration into Germany. A lot of it is people who just had an anti-urban identity. Often it is not so much as white flight, not so much white flight from a diverse city as right-wing flight from a left-wing city. And there's this kind of mentality that in Munich is like too libertine or something, too queer, too full of people who vote SPD or something. So people in the suburbs, the core of CSU, like the S-Bahn because they can ride the train to the city. Now, is there not like American suburbanites? American suburbanites would want all of the intermediate stops in the city killed. Um, Thank you very much. There are intermediate stops in the city. They're fair integrated with the U-Bahn and the buses and the trams. The trains are pretty frequent at these intermediate stops. Again, I don't want to say that this is America, but some of the political contention here is American style. So this was politically the second tunnel, a project owned not by. I would not compare it with Austin. I would not compare this with Austin. Austin, first of all, um, keep Austin weird is much more Berlin than Munich. Like Austin's kind of rebellious streak, if you call it, but I mean rebellion that at this point has been corporatized is very much Berlin and not Munich. Munich has always been, again, has always for generations been incredibly wealthy, like very conventionally wealthy. Um, in this sense, Munich might be more than New York of Germany. Um, like sure, there's a counterculture, there's a huge counterculture, but it's not what underlies the city. Um, and so in uh, but in terms of the city that's surrounded by much more conservative suburbs, um, it's something that exists, and again, in much of America. I don't want to say Austin. It's something that's, if anything, Metro Austin is the most left wing metro area in the American South, unless you count Miami as southern. Um, Rather, it may be more, let's call it Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is more racial, maybe more Dallas, Houston, Nashville, like places where the core, Charlotte, places where the core city tends to elect left wing um, politicians, and then the suburbs are thoroughly right wing. Um, but again, still less racially contentious. Maybe it is starting to get more racially contentious now, but the the Zweite Stammstrecke is not a post 2015 project. It's an idea. I mean, I showed you the Google. I Googled it and showed you some links from 2010. Um, and this had been mulled in the 2000s already. Um, so there's this giant cost overrun. Bear in mind, this is a project that should have broken ground not 3 or 4 years ago, but 15 years ago, and um, and the delays are going to hurt. And so I did look briefly at this construction site. It's being portrayed as the construction site that it is, Marienplatz, and this is a big construction site. I don't know how much of it is going to be drilled down because some of it is, for example, temporary worker housing. This is a thing. If we treat this as kind of the stuff that's not going to be dug and just this compound, which I do not want to commit to, please. Um, this is 7,000 square meters. Um, it's no, this is something like 70 meters wide, and the platforms aren't going to be that wide. The platform, so something to understand, the platform is very wide on this project. Uh, Let me find it. And I'm going to do the German version because the English one has insufficient information. And I'm going to see if Stationsbau will explain it in full, or at least in full enough for the purposes of this video. So first of all, note, because the U-Bahn was built simultaneously with the first S-Bahn trunk, the S-Bahn trunk don't need to go underneath an older system. Everything was dug up at once. Um, and this is being dug up later, and this is much, much more difficult. This is why regional rail in our database is always more expensive than subways in the same city. Okay, I cannot find what this is. I'm going to see if Marienhof is going to explain. No, I don't need Lage der Station. Okay, so first of all, you can see how big of a dig it is. here. How do they make people accept it? There are, first of all, they said it would only take a few years and it would be restored afterward. Second, let me put my head back. Second, this is not the only empty space for a city square, because literally at the other end of City Hall there's this bit. But yeah, even just being able to do it was a pretty big I think, success, because I know that in Belgium, for example, Line 3 tried to build stations in city squares like this, and that ran into a lot of neighborhood opposition, and the and it's neighborhood opposition from places that are poor, um, I believe pretty racially diverse, the sort of places that if they agitated for um, less police brutality or something, the state would have told them to shove off. But if they're agitating for keeping their park or something like that petty, the state actually listens. So the upshot is that it's made Line 3 in Brussels more expensive and more complex than it needs to be. Um, so yeah, this part doesn't seem to have been a big problem. Like they're not mining the station. They're cut and covering it, but they're cut and covering it down to a depth of 40 meters. So, um, and moreover, they're using the Spanish solution. I'm going to see if you can see where, shit, I accidentally X'd things. Let me see if I can find so, Spanish, Spanish, München, S-Bahn. Yeah, it's called the Spanish solution, which is so the idea of the Spanish solution is that they have. I don't need to do this in German. It's gonna be done anyway. Is that you have two tracks, and instead of one island platform or two side platforms, you have both. And so, and moreover, the way it works in Munich is they make you board from the middle and alight from the sides to improve passenger circulation. The upshot is that it's not just. And by the way, they say it's million plus. It's more than million plus. Um, the upshot is that it means that the platforms have to be very wide when you combine all of them. I believe it's 15.55, and then with these, it means that the dig width is more than 30 meters. Just taking those into account. Just taking the uh, actual volume, just taking the actual width of the station platforms, and you always need to dig more because, for example, in New York, Second Avenue subway is under Second Avenue, which is 30 meters, and if you look at the platform plus the two tracks, it's not Spanish there. Um, it's on the order of, I believe, about 20 meters, but they have had to dig a little bit more. Um, so so 31 meters, think of it as more than that. This looks like about 70. It's not, most of it's not going to be dug down to platform level, but some of it is. And if you just do 35, let's say, 35 times, this is about 100 meters, times depth of 40, that's 140 square meters. 140,000, not square, 140,000 cubic meters. And then there's the more stuff that's going to be dug down to the mezzanine. 100 meters is only half the platform. The platform is 210 meters. So they're going to mine here and they're going to mine here. That's going to be expensive because you're going to need to mine underneath a historic city center. These are all historic buildings. This is a historic church. You can't just demolish. I mean, maybe you can. It's plausibly more expensive than mining. Property values in the center of Munich are high. And so the dig volume might well be over 200 1,000 cubic meters, and if you take into account that much of it is mined, it's the equivalent of much more. So this is really expensive. Now, bear in mind, Crossrail had things that were probably about this complex. So this is I don't want to say it's going to be more expensive than Crossrail. It might possibly be more expensive than Crossrail per station. The Crossrail stations were something like £500 million. So this, I mean, yeah, even I don't know, maybe. I mean, I guess even with yeah, I guess if you inflate this to 2037, maybe it's €1 billion per station, which again is obscene. Okay, in Italy, stations are not much smaller than this. €500 million is what you get at the Colosseum, or the Imperial Forum, the places where you literally cannot have any kind of building settlement because these are priceless artifacts. And and so but remember, these are just 3 underground stations: Ostbahnhof, Marienplatz, Hauptbahnhof. These should not be as hard to This is hard to dig because it's underneath so much stuff. This is deep, but is less deep. So I don't know. Again, I can't explain to you why it's so incredibly expensive, but what I can guarantee to you, from what I've talked to Germans about this and to other Northern Europeans, is if you tell them that Italy does things more efficiently, they will laugh, or that Spaniards do things more efficiently, they will laugh. This is why I opened this video with talking about these safari trips that Americans who constantly look down on Europe do, and even the Americans who don't look down on Europe, who maybe the ones who look up to Europe for universal healthcare or having trains, do so in a way that's very, I don't want to say fanish, but very uninformed, like the sort of way that an American Zionist worships Israel with very little knowledge of Israel's internal workings, or the way that a Western communist might worship the Soviet Union and have zero clue how the Soviet Union worked. And so it's kind of that kind of weird fanish attitude that maybe looks at Europe, and it's not hypothetical, by the way. One of the big boosters of California high-speed rail, Robert Cruikshank, who later became communications director to the mayor of Seattle, literally started liking high-speed rail because he was on a tourism trip in Spain, rode the train, liked the train, came back home saying America should have that too, and then whenever California was doing something that was grossly incompetent and very obviously different from how Spain was doing things, he didn't even pay attention because his knowledge of Spain was purely as a tourist. So this is a real problem, and again, I'm starting by slagging on Americans, but really, this is a German problem because Germans are the ones who visit Italy and Spain and think that nobody there works hard, because no shit, if you visit Alicante, you're not going to be in contact with a very hardworking Spanish middle class. You're going to be in contact with other people on vacation, and with people who work in the tourism industry, who, other than the hotel owners, are not the middle class. Okay, I mean, hotel staff is a large, I think, growing working class job. So yeah, you encounter people who work low-paid service jobs, and then you assume that everyone there just works low-pay service jobs, and that engineers who might have something to teach you don't exist. You don't visit the offices of downtown Madrid. If you go vacation in Madrid or Barcelona, maybe you are at a hotel near city center, but the tourist sites are not the office buildings. Okay, and I mean, you don't go into an engineering office, into a government engineering office during a tourism trip. Okay, do you think I'm going to, even with my rail financials, do you think I'm going to engineering offices here? I literally picked dates that didn't even match the dates on which the information center for the Zweite Stammstrecke is open. No, I can't. No, I went to a transport museum and I went to the memorial at Dachau, the concentration camp at Dachau. Um, so so this is a big problem where there are these horrific construction costs. And this is specific to this project. Now, German construction costs are high by Southern European standards, um, but often, if you gaze at our database, for example, often the reason those costs are high um, is that Germany does not build enough. Germany doesn't build enough public transit, um, especially not things like high-speed rail or tunnels. Or urban tunnels. It builds plenty of tunnels for high-speed rail more than it needs to. But things like subway tunnels, Germany doesn't build enough. And for example, in Berlin, what do they build? They only build the things that basically the things that not only scream "build me," but that nobody could ever object to. Things like the U5 link, right? During Corona, Berlin opened this subway extension, so from Alexanderplatz under Unter den Linden to Brandenburger Tor, where it hooked into an existing, slightly older U-Bahn line, to Hauptbahnhof. So this is something very complex. It's under city center. Yes, it's a wide street, but you're not going to open up Unter den Linden. I mean, maybe they should have, but they didn't. Um, they only opened up parts of it, and you're going underneath the river, and the soil is sandy. It had to be frozen. Um, and you can't demolish buildings. So something very complex. So yeah, the construction cost per kilometer was higher here because this was approximately the three hardest kilometers to build in Berlin, or 200 hardest kilometers to build in Berlin. And maybe the stuff that's lower cost per kilometer, things like something I'm never gonna tire of pointing out, that they should be extending U8 in my city from its current northern terminus, which is Wittenau. So you see the U here, that's the northern terminus of U8. They should extend it to Märkisches Viertel. You can see the project. You can see, I mean, maybe your eyes look at the green spaces as well, but this is a very high density project. It's about as dense as the inner parts of Berlin. Bigger gaps between the buildings, as you can see, much more greenery, but look at how big the buildings are. In the city center, they're not this big. They're 6 floors, 7 floors. And of course, city center still has parks. And so this should be built. This was promised in the 70s. They've taken this long to only get U8 as far as here. And the projected cost per kilometer is not high. I think it's maybe $150 million, not dollars, maybe 150 million euros per kilometer. And the projected cost per rider is low. I think it's something like 14,000, 15,000 euros per rider. Unfortunately, it's not being built because of some very petty politics, I think, between the various localities in the city. So maybe the reason German construction costs are high is that the cheaper things are not being built for petty reasons. So things like outer extensions of the U-Bahn, outer extensions that in Italy are being built all the time, and in Spain are being built all the time, and in Paris are being built all the time. And the stuff that maybe they are deigning to build in Berlin now, they're talking about extending U7 to the airport, making it the third, I believe, independent way to get to the airport. There's the S-Bahn, there's the regional trains that are not the S-Bahn, and now they're going to be the U-Bahn. Everyone loves airport connectors like that. I slug on airport connectors. Like, the cost per rider here is not bad. It's just higher than for UA to Märkisches Viertel. But anyway, you can look at the projected cost per kilometer. It's not high. So maybe German construction costs are not even that problematic compared with what is being built. And now you look in Munich, and even compared with what is being built, like this is even on the most optimistic assumptions on how much they're baking in inflation, this is going to be about as bad as Crossrail. So pretty complex, but Crossrail is not just pretty complex. Crossrail is also huge Anglosphere cost problem. This is not supposed to be the Anglosphere, and yet. So again, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I doubt this is getting cancelled. This project. I mean, it's already in the ground. It's necessary. The projected ridership is very high. I don't know if it's going to double Munich S-Bahn ridership. I doubt it. But 7 billion euros to be able to break even on construction costs. The ridership you need is probably something like 200,000 a day, maybe less because this is again 7 billion euros in the euros of the 2030s. Um, so something like even 150,000 a day, 200,000 a day, they will get that. It's just something that honestly should have been 2 billion, 3 billion, in fact. Um, and um, and now you're asking me before about North-South line. Possibly, if doing the second tunnel here would have been 2 billion euros and not 7, they could have built bigger like not bigger, longer tunnels. Something like instead of doing this awkwardness, doing something like I don't know this, and then maybe doing something, and then maybe eliminate the awkwardness, the awkward bench at S-Bahn and doing something like this. So maybe so maybe 3 trunk lines or something like that, and then only 2 of them even need to hit to hit Hauptbahnhof if there are this many. But um, but the construction costs in Munich are not low enough for this, and unfortunately, I don't see much interest in Northern Europe in learning from the lower cost Southern European examples. So it's been an hour and a half, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask people if they have quick questions. Not Patreon creator updates, but any comments on the abysmal punctuality stats? Okay, so first of all, I do not know enough about the Genoa metro expansion for this. I think you're on Twitter. Uh, ping Marco about this. Ping Marco Kitty about this. He will know more. About the abysmal punctuality stats. My understanding is that they're just struggling with increased ridership. This is something that has so bear in mind that their punctuality stats in 2021 were only as good as in 2019, and in 2021 they still had lower ridership, and now as ridership is carrying past the pre-corona peak, they're struggling. Again, they have these cascading delays where a train is more crowded than usual, and so they cancel it or they try to get passengers off it for the next train, and that delays those passengers, um, and I don't know if they're even running a lot more. Uh, I don't even know if to what extent they're counting it passenger centric, and I don't even think they're running unusually many trains. It's just a lot of it is kind of bursting at the seams. Um, what do you mean continuous build on metros? When you mean this is not competing with Amtrak long. I mean Amtrak long distance. I mean I've heard of multi-day delays there. Um, what do you mean by continuous build on metros? Do you mean just building continuously, like every couple of years to build a new extension, rather than doing the extensions in one binge? Um, the answer is that I don't know. Because, for example, Sweden is binging, and yes, the costs in Sweden are rising, but they're not rising for reasons that are about the binge. The problem in Sweden is not. So what you would expect if the binge were a problem? So, what Sweden did, what Stockholm did, is spent 20 years, 25 years, not extending the subway at all. I guess they did I guess 20 years not expanding any urban rail, and then they opened Citybanen, and now they're doing the subway expansion, the Nya Tunnelbanen. Usually when you do this, the problem with this kind of scaling up, it has to do with project management. This is problem that Paris had actually with Grand Paris Express, because it's a 200-kilometer project, one that is so much bigger than anything they've done so far. And they did run into project management capacity problems, and this did lead to higher costs and to cost overruns. Um, and I don't think that they're reacting to this correctly. They're reacting to this with a little more design build and a special purpose delivery vehicle that, rather than continuous build in which it's expected that when it is done they will do something of similar magnitude. Um, but that is not a problem that Sweden had. Again, Sweden has had cost overruns, but for other reasons. But you mean building a new extension so when the last one and then the next day no one starts? There's no real reason to do that. So they soft do that is they soft do that in Madrid. In Madrid, what I've heard is that they have dedicated tunnel boring machines for each line, so they just keep the tunneling machine when they're done, so that they may want to expand it later. But bear in mind, the project managers move around, the workers move around. You don't need to do this in the same city, let alone the same line. You can do it in the same country, sometimes even the same region. Um, so, so for example, in the entire Nordic region, it's so so mobile internally that that if for some reason Stockholm goes a long period without building, they could get people um, from Copenhagen or Oslo or maybe even Helsinki. Um, and maybe the civil service is more national, but the civil service is national. They build a lot of other things. So that's not, it's not a bad thing to do, but it's also not something that is necessary for our efficiency. Yeah, Lausanne does this. Also bear in mind that Lausanne, I think, is the only Swiss city that has a metro. Okay, like Swiss cities don't do that. Swiss cities just do trams and commuter trains. Are any of these countries that built a lot close to reaching the point where there's little to no project left to build? I don't think so. Um, so if there's a country that would reach that point, it is Italy. Why would it be Italy? Because let's look at the world, not Wordle, world, not Worldle either, just Word, World Bank. So let us look at the dynamo that is the Italian economy. Yeah. For those keeping track at home, okay, so first of all, it hasn't fully recovered Corona, but that's, I mean, by 2022 it will have, but this is Corona. This is on the eve of Corona. About the same as not even the pure recession peak, but before the double dip. This is on the eve of the Great Recession. So 42,746. This is what Italy had in 2000. Italy has had 20 years of zero per capita income growth. France has had 20 years of weak per capita income growth. Macron is elected here. And then Germany. In 2005, Germany and Italy were not different from each other. Anyway, I bring this up not just to say that Germany is superior to Italy. It isn't when it comes to construction. But Italy has a stagnant economy. Now, this being Europe, birth rates are negative. I mean, natural growth rates are negative. You need immigration to sustain. There's no real reason anyone... So Italy did not have a large colonial empire. Yes, it had Libya. Yes, it had Eritrea. For a few years, it had Ethiopia. That's not a large base of people in poor countries, which Libya is not even that poor, who speak Italian. France has a vast colonial empire that still has a lot of French speakers. So you might understand why someone from, let's say, Haiti or Senegal or Algeria or Vietnam might move to France and not much richer Germany. But nobody's going to move into Italy rather than Germany. So Italy does have immigration. Italy does not have a lot of immigration. So the population in Italy um is basically flat. Again, there's immigration, but nothing near German level, and it's not just because Italians are racist against immigrants, although they are. It's because um, there just isn't a groundswell of people trying to move to Italy the way there are people trying to move to Germany, to Sweden, to Britain, to the United States, to Canada. Um, and um, so you would expect that Italy would run out of projects to build, right? But no, it doesn't. Italy still has good projects to build. Even Italy. Um, Now, Italy may not have an infinite budget for this. I think Italy should be building more than it is building. Italy does have problems with austerity. Um, so Italy has been running primary budget surpluses for quite a while now. Um, sorry, I can maybe I don't want to cry on Italy too much. Rome has some things that scream build me, like connecting these commuter lines. Um, Bear in mind, remember, all construction in Rome is going to be more expensive because uh, yeah, this, this, yeah. Uh, you are not building that at the normal Italian cost. You're building that at much more, by which I mean the normal French or German cost, maybe even a little bit higher than that, because if there's because the Monument Protection Agency is just never going to let you risk anything here. You want to build, I don't know, 19th century residential neighborhoods, like something around here? Yeah, do whatever you want. But not in the historic center of Rome. Uh, yeah, no, the connecting islands bit is kind of crayon. Like, I get why they're trying to do it, but I mean, remember how I complained that Italy is stagnant? So it's not a stagnating south growing north. All of Italy is stagnating at the same rate. However, the north is still much richer than the south. Immigrants go to the north. I believe that in the south, something like 2% of the population is foreign born. In the north, it's something like 12%. Um, because again, why would someone move to Sicily when they can move to Milan? Okay, I mean, yes, Sicily is closer, but once you've actually made it past the boat to Sicily, you can just go to Rome, you can go to Milan. The language is the same. Um, so, and the wages in Milan are twice what they are in Sicily. So, um, the so even Italy has not run out of things, let alone Spain. Spain is not as wealthy. It may have overtaken Italy recently. I'm not sure, but Spain got pummeled in the recession. Yeah, Spain's still poorer than Italy. It got pummeled, but it's actually recovered. Spain, on the eve of Corona, was richer, not by much, but richer than pre-recession. And again, it hasn't recovered. Um, it had to do a massive lockdown. Um, Part of it's just poverty. Spain and Italy are much poorer than France and Germany, which in turn are. At this point, I don't think Germany is poorer than Sweden, but the housing looks like it is. So the point is that Italians and Spaniards live with their parents until a much older age than French and Germans, who in turn stay at home until a much older age than Nordics. The proportion in all of the Nordic countries, something like 20% of people age 18 to 34 live with their parents. This is the lowest rate I know of in the world. The United States is rather like France and Germany. This is also why Sweden, despite its total failure on Corona, did better than the United States and most of Europe, and why the non-Sweden Nordics, so Finland, Norway, Denmark, the ones that did okay um, on policy, and you didn't even have very harsh lockdowns like Italy and Spain. You do that plus the fact that people live alone. These are the biggest Corona fortresses in Europe. I'm not saying the Western world, but I don't think New Zealand. But I don't think Australia and New Zealand are worse than that. Um, Early on, obviously they were better until the variants got them. Um, yes, you can build at the Colosseum. It's just at very high cost. Um, So my point is that Italy and Spain, again, it's just taking longer to recover, but it's likely they will recover to some extent. And again, Spain has had positive growth. Spain, also remember how I said that in Italy it's not likely that people will just want to move there because why would you move to Italy when you can move to Germany or France? Um, Now in Spain there is an answer. Why would you move there? Because when you can move to Germany or France, and the answer is you speak Spanish because maybe you're from Latin America. Um, and if the Spanish economy is strong, then it can actually attract Latin American immigrants, and Spain encourages that. My understanding of how racism against Latin Americans works in Europe, it's a very complex thing, and I don't fully understand it. Um, for example, my understanding is that in a very large, more liberal city, let's call it Berlin, let's call it Paris, a Latin American, even a relatively brown-skinned one, is basically a type of Spaniard. Um, but maybe in Spain it's different. I don't know. But again, but in maybe less urban parts, I specifically heard a complaint about Bordeaux that if you're Mexican in Bordeaux, people will stare at you. But Spain specifically gives citizen Spain naturalizes immigrants from former Spanish colonies in a very advantageous basis, and the same is true for I think Portugal for Brazilians. So so there was before the recession massive immigration into Spain. Some from parts of Eastern Europe that were attracted by maybe lower wages than in Germany, but plentiful employment in construction. Some by Latin American immigrants who spoke the same language already. And so in Spain, there's still a lot of stuff to be built. Now the high speed rail system, the only stuff, honestly, the only stuff that's been left to be built there is stuff that's being built. Things like completing the line from Madrid to Basque Country, cross border stuff. But the most important cross border here, Spain has completed. It's just France that's dithering. Maybe they can build a cross border here if they really care, um, but there's still quite a lot of stuff to be built within the cities. Um, let alone in Germany, where first of all we have growth because look here, um, I believe this is the fastest per capita income growth since pre Great Recession in the G7. I believe it goes Germany, then US, then Canada. Italy, not the best. Um, and then and this again attracts immigrants. There is pretty considerable immigration into Germany. The immigration is to where the jobs are. Uh, Munich, for example, is very racially diverse. It's something that is very visible um, when I'm in the center when I'm visiting the center of Munich, which I am. Uh, Again, I see quite a lot of people of color. And again, I can maybe look at statistics and confirm that maybe Munich does not have the demographics of New York or London, but it is um, rather racially diverse. Uh, and so we expect Munich to keep growing, so Munich needs to be building more. Unfortunately, the construction costs in Munich are so high that it's very difficult to do so. Now, Berlin is much less wealthy than Munich, but it is growing very rapidly. A lot of the more recent tech industries in Berlin, not Munich, I think it's the English language. Berlin also needs to build more. Hamburg, Frankfurt, Köln, I'm much less familiar with. So I can't tell you, oh yeah, there are these things that scream build me. I imagine there are, just don't know them very well. But in Berlin, I can tell you exactly that no, the city's not even close to running out of things to build. Yeah, building to Lisbon would be good for Spain, but that's a Portuguese project, not a Spanish one. And my understanding is that there were proposed high-speed lines in Portugal, and then they were cancelled due to recession austerity. Sadly, not revived. Maybe revived very recently. Are there any more questions I should ask? every time I say, oh, it's been an hour and a half, let's finish early, and then it becomes a 2 hour. Oh, yeah. See you next time, Prague, and yeah, have a fun work meeting, or maybe not fun work. Have a good work meeting. Um, any other questions? Oh, I hope it's not just talk. Do I think that Munich S-Bahn should lengthen its routes? Oh, you mean just extend the S-Bahn routes farther into the suburbs? I do not know. Um, I don't know. Um, so I do think that it would be good to have better interurban routes. I think that S-Bahn does go into Freising. It doesn't go into Augsburg, and I don't know. I mean, Augsburg eventually mentioned to Augsburg should have a high-speed line. So this should be 20 minutes. Uh, but having a regional line that does this at a good time, by which I mean less than an hour, not 56 minutes, but much less than that. That would be nice. Like this is an important intercity line. Like they could do a regional express that is not slow. Let me see what Munich to Augsburg is. And again, that's not peri-urban. That's a separate city. Uh, München, Augsburg. Uh, let's do Monday, and let's see what happens if I do Nur Nachschlag. Because I imagine it's going to be an hour. Okay, 48 minutes. I mean, that's still pretty short. That's still pretty slow. I mean, think if they can get it done in 40 less turnaround, so that would be 37, and then running every half hour. In general, I think too many regional trains in Germany run hourly that should run half hour. Um, I mean, especially when it's stuff like München, Augsburg. Like, how often does this run? The direct train runs every hour. Okay, maybe that's because it's 9 in the evening. What if it's less than that? Okay, now it's running every half hour, but not on a recognizable takt. Why are you doing this to me? Just run on the takt. So this is 2 trains per hour, but it's not on a good takt or anything, and I can't tell why RB86, RB87 does this. Um, instead of whereas RE9 just does its thing. Um, again, I don't know, and bear in mind that the population density, let's say past Dachau, is very low already. So I don't know to what extent things farther out screen build me. Uh, whereas in general, S-Bahns are urban. They're useful in the suburbs. Um, and the urban services overlay, but the urban service is where the most crowding is. Like there's a lot of just urban service. And I don't just mean me as a tourist doing things like Ostbahnhof to Marienplatz or Ostbahnhof to Hauptbahnhof or Hauptbahnhof to okay to Dachau it's longer, but things like that. So I can't give you a more coherent answer. Are there other questions? Other from you borners or from other people? Thanks. All right, we're hitting 2 hours. I'm gonna give people like 1 or 2 more minutes to ask questions. The traditional um, ending every recorded video on a minute or two of awkwardness, and if there are questions, I will answer. But if there aren't any, then we can end. Alright, if there are no further questions, then thanks you for watching. Thanks, Frankie, for sticking around. I will see you again next week with another video on a topic TBD. So thank you all for watching, and ciao ciao.